So, I am very pleased to introduce our online audience, the two featured guest scientists who will be speaking at the Bowen Center's Fall Symposium on November 7th and 8th. Dr. Darby Saxby is clinical professor of psychology and professor of psychology at the University of Southern California. She researches stress in the context of family relationships, including the impact on fathers as well as mothers, uh, especially more recently as they become first-time parents, and lots of other things. Gabriel Leone is a fourth-year PhD student working with Dr. Saxby. His research focuses on understanding the interpersonal processes that underlie formation of close bonds, families facing adversity. Welcome. The question I have for each of you.
Thank you for
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming. The question I have for each of you is what you find most exciting about your research. I'm sure it's more than one thing, but Dr. Saxby, let's start with you.
Okay, that's a hard one. I think it's all exciting. I think one of the things that got me interested in studying families is that so much of psychology operates on the level of the individual. So we're really focused on individual emotions, individual experiences, but we evolved to live in social groups and in particularly family groups. And so looking at dyads and triads and relationships within close others really interests me. And it's also a reminder that we we think we're a very advanced species, but we're really animals. And, as humans, things like our physiology and our brain structure and chemistry follow with our relationship configuration. So I'm always fascinated by how our close relationships affect our individual stress and brain responses.
Boy, that sure fits with Bowen theory, uh, which is a theory of relationships. And so that, of course, is one of the reasons we were interested in inviting you. Um, have you have you looked at the kind of simultaneous interaction of mothers and fathers and with the kids who come along?
Definitely. Yeah, in a number of different ways. So both kind of in momentary ways and Gabe has done a lot of great work on that and also kind of over time how, relationship quality perhaps before a baby is born might influence a couple or family outcomes after the birth of a child, for example.
Hmm, good stuff. Well, I'm glad to see that you're making the effort to break out of the individual model and even out of the dyad and beginning to look at the interlocking of relationships, what Bowen would call triangles. And okay, well, let me swing over to Gabe for a minute then. Um, Gabe, what do you find most exciting about your research? Understand that it has to do with relationships too, especially the challenge families face under adversity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think uncoincidentally, I share a lot of the same interests and enthusiasm as Darby does, being one of her students. Yeah, I also see mental health and physical health is deeply intertwined with our relationships, particularly the relationships that matter most to us, in families, romantic relationships, parent-child relationships, and relationships are like a dance, they're dynamic. You can't understand them by just looking at individuals in isolation. You got to see them as interdependent components of a bigger system. So I carry that theory into my empirical research. It drives the type of questions I ask, and being in a clinical psychology, clinical science program, one of the things that excites me the most is an eye towards application and intervention. I think it's cool to be at the interface of basic science and building theory, and also understanding how we can actually meet the needs of families who may be facing chronic stress, for coping with trauma or these other barriers that crop up. How can we help them cope together as a family? So um, that's what really excites me. It excites me as a developing scholar. How can we help families that maybe could benefit from more relationship focused and relationship informed types of interventions?
Great. Have there been any specific findings that kind of have caught your attention in your work?
Yeah, so within our lab, we have a cohort of families that Darby has been following since pregnancy, the expectant parents that were getting ready to have their first child. They came to the laboratory multiple times during pregnancy and postpartum as well. And we're actually bringing them back now at a 7-year follow-up. So during those lab visits, we have a lot of data of families, parents interacting with one another, having different types of conversations. And from that data, we've been able to actually gather information about couples' interpersonal dynamics. And those dynamics can predict things like couples' relationship quality, couples' perceived stress. So that's the type of work that myself and some of the other research assistants in our lab have been working on. And that's pretty exciting to me. It's exciting that we can observe patterns of interpersonal behavior, and it actually maps onto some of the indicators we care about. So
Mhm.
that's what's been most recent with some of the projects we've been working on.
Mhm. Is family therapy or some version of consultation been part of the research for you?
So our research isn't necessarily like it's not a randomized control trial, like we're not piloting interventions or applying interventions or anything like that. It is kind of more basic science research about, the different biological and psychological changes that parents undergo, particularly fathers, during the transition to parenthood. Um, However, though, the questions I asked in the lab are motivated by my clinical work. I work a lot with, currently I'm at a placement where I get to work with foster and adoptive families, which is quite incredible. And I also get to co-facilitate a parenting group for parents who are formerly incarcerated and gang involved, and getting to know those family stories very well. It gives me, I think, a greater perspective on um, how relationship functioning may affect many different areas of our life, and actually be a resource for us to cope during tough times. So yeah, even though our lab doesn't necessarily work in applying interventions directly, they're informed by what we know from clinical psychology.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Dr. Saxby, I've noticed, in fact, we put three of your recent op-ed pieces, I think it's the New York Times, up on our website. So clearly, the research you're doing, you believe, has practical implications for policy and work with families. Could you say a little bit about some of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love spouting off my opinions and foisting them on the world. But I mean, I think I'm really passionate about wanting to translate psychological science to the public. And there are a lot of voices out there. I think it's valuable to have informed voices and to try to communicate the science that we do. So right now, I'm actually writing a book. It's about how fatherhood changes the brain and body. And it's been a real pleasure to get to kind of not only try to talk about my own work in this area and try to synthesize it and, make it more accessible, but really to delve into the research literature from anthropology and neuroscience and biology to try to tell this story of fatherhood as transformative. So, that I see that as a really kind of important and even, it's emerging as being more important part of my profile as a professor and researcher is to talk not just to students in the classroom, but try to talk to folks who are curious about learning more about research, but maybe don't have a subscription to a paywalled scientific journal or the ability to attend a research conference.
Hmm. Yes, indeed. I noticed some overlaps between what you were writing about in the Times and some conclusions that Bowen theory might tend toward. In fact, Murray Bowen's original research at NIH, you may know, and Gabe may know, um, started with mothers and young adult schizophrenic offspring. And 8 months into the research, he added fathers. And that made a big difference in therapeutic response and in just understanding how emotional process wasn't confined to the individual or even the mother offspring, but fathers were a key part of that process and part of the effort to change. So it's exciting. All right. Um, well, this was not supposed to be a long interview. I personally would like to spend about an hour with you, uh, but I know each of you have other things on board later this morning. So I just want to thank each of you for putting in the time to meet with me and to come to the symposium. You're in a long line of extremely distinguished scientists who've been part of the symposium as guests, and I look forward to engaging each of you, and I'm looking forward to your engagement with the other speakers um, at the symposium. So thanks very much, and we'll see you when you get here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation. We're looking forward to it. It'll be great to meet you in person and the rest of your group.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, likewise. Thank you for having us.
You bet. All right. Bye for now.
Bye bye.
Bye.